The death of George Floyd, a case that shook America. On the evening of May 25, 2020, a phone call was made to 911 from Cup Foods, a convenience store located in South Minneapolis, Minnesota. The call reported that a man had used a counterfeit $20.00 bill to buy cigarettes. The man was still sitting in a vehicle parked outside the store. That man was George Perry Floyd, Jr., a 46-year-old African-American. He had moved to Minneapolis for a fresh start and worked as a security guard. On that day, he was sitting in the car with two other people. At around 8:08 p.m., two officers from the Minneapolis Police Department, Thomas Lane and J. Alexander Kueng, arrived on the scene. They approached the car, knocked on the window, and confronted Floyd. Lane pointed his gun at Floyd almost immediately, ordering him to put his hands on the dashboard. Floyd complied, though visibly shaken. The officers pulled Floyd out of the car. They handcuffed him and led him to the sidewalk. He was questioned briefly and appeared distressed. According to body cam footage, Floyd told the officers multiple times that he was claustrophobic and didn't want to be placed in the back of the police vehicle. Shortly afterward, officers Derek Chauvin and Tu Tao arrived. Chauvin was a 19-year veteran of the department. Tu Tao was of Hmong descent and had been with the department for over a decade. After Floyd resisted being placed in the back seat, a brief struggle occurred. The officers pushed him to the ground. He ended up lying face down next to the rear wheel of the police vehicle with his hands cuffed behind his back. At that point, Derek Chauvin knelt on Floyd's neck and maintained that position for 9 minutes and 29 seconds. Throughout the ordeal, George Floyd repeatedly said, "I can't breathe." He called out for his mother. Bystanders, many of whom were recording the incident on their phones, pleaded with the officers to let Floyd up. One off-duty firefighter offered to check his pulse. She was ignored. Tao stood between the crowd and Chauvin, preventing anyone from intervening. At around the 6-minute mark, Floyd became unresponsive. Despite this, Chauvin continued to apply pressure. Lane twice asked if they should roll Floyd onto his side. Chauvin refused. An ambulance was called at 8:27 p.m. When paramedics arrived, Floyd was not breathing and showed no signs of a pulse. He was transported to Hennepin County Medical Center, where he was later pronounced dead. The next day, the Minneapolis Police Department issued a press release titled, "Man Dies After Medical Incident During Police Interaction." It did not mention the knee on the neck. However, within hours, video footage captured by 17-year-old Darnella Frazier went viral. The video showed the full extent of Chauvin's actions. The outrage was immediate. Protests erupted in Minneapolis and quickly spread across the United States and around the world. Demonstrators chanted Floyd's final words, "I can't breathe," and demanded justice. Many called for policing reforms and the end of systemic racism. On May 29, 4 days after Floyd's death, Derek Chauvin was arrested and charged with third-degree murder and second-degree manslaughter. The charges were later elevated to include second-degree unintentional murder. Tu Tao, Thomas Lane, and J. Alexander Kueng were also charged with aiding and abetting second-degree murder and manslaughter. The trial of Derek Chauvin began on March 29, 2021 in Minneapolis. It was televised and closely watched by millions. Over 3 weeks, the jury heard testimony from witnesses, medical experts, and law enforcement officials. The prosecution argued that Chauvin's use of force was excessive and directly caused Floyd's death. The defense argued that Floyd died from underlying health conditions and drug use, not from Chauvin's actions. The most damning evidence came from multiple angles: bystander videos, body camera footage, and the testimony of Minneapolis Police Chief Medaria Arredondo, who said Chauvin's actions violated department policy. On April 20, 2021, the jury returned its verdict. Derek Chauvin was found guilty on all 3 charges: second-degree unintentional murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter. He was later sentenced to 22.5 years in prison. The other 3 officers, Tu Tao, Thomas Lane, and J. Alexander Kueng, were tried separately. Each faced both state and federal charges. In 2022, all three were convicted in federal court of violating Floyd's civil rights. Lane and Quang later pleaded guilty to state charges of aiding and abetting manslaughter, while Tao was found guilty by a judge in a separate state trial. The death of George Floyd was a turning point. It sparked one of the largest protest movements in American history, Black Lives Matter. Cities and states across the country debated police reform, including bans on chokeholds and changes to qualified immunity laws. Corporate institutions made public statements, streets were renamed, murals were painted, new conversations began. Yet for many, the deeper questions remain unresolved. How do you address centuries of systemic racism? How do you rebuild trust between communities and the police? What does justice really look like? George Floyd's death was more than a single incident. It became a global symbol of the demand for accountability, fairness, and human dignity. Though the trial is over, the impact continues.